I guess, in the spirit of information sharing across different departments and agencies. As we heard earlier this morning from our colleague from the Philippines, the eAPP implementation is really a whole of government project. And I think in that spirit, we are also joined by two additional speakers from Israel. Ms. Yael Weiner, who is the Senior Director of International Law within the Office of the Deputy Attorney General for International Law at the Ministry of Justice, as well as Ms. Aviva Shavit, who is Deputy Director of the Department of Licensing of Notaries within the Ministry of Justice as well. So welcome to you both. And of course, I'm happy to kind of throw questions generally to the three of you for Israel, and you can decide who answers. But perhaps to kick us off there, I'd be interested to know, I guess, maybe the first question there will be how you've managed to coordinate between, I guess, these I imagine, three different agencies or offices within the ministry, and how that coordination has worked across the different departments. I'm not sure if that's more appropriate for Aviva or Yael.
I think Yael, that was for me. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, could you repeat the question again? So just so I'll be in focus here. Yeah,
that's okay. No, I'm just interested in how you've managed to coordinate across the different agencies or departments within the ministry, and how has that worked? And obviously it's gone quite well. But if you could tell us a little bit more about how you've coordinated across the different offices.
Yeah. So the Israeli eAPP will be issued by the Ministry of Justice, and the process of application for the eAPP will likely be made by the customers through the web portals for each government department. And we actually establish a task force, which is a team of technological and legal people who coordinate between all the offices and government departments. And this whole process is a very difficult and challenging process. So we have to work closely together, and we're working with each office to ensure a seamless process. So as I said, the members of the task force that was established by the Ministry of Justice for the development of the eAPP are working closely together with all the compartments. And we try to jointly develop the application process for the eAPP and to ensure consistency. That means we are working closely with each one of the departments by itself to make sure their documents are electronically and they join the eAPP process. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, thank you. Perhaps I might also then throw the same or a similar question across to Süheyla in Turkey, because as we know, Turkey has different competent authorities, and of course from the PTT, you've had to kind of coordinate that process. How have things gone for you in Turkey in terms of coordinating across the different ministries or agencies?
Thank you. Since we were given the duty of intermediary by law, we applied to our other stakeholders to produce an apostille document. As a result of our application, we started integrations. When the integrations were completed, we started the test. When the tests were successful, we switched to the live environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps then, Cristina in Luxembourg, the extent to which I suppose things have been part of within the same ministry, but have you also had experiences in coordinating with other departments or offices in your experience with planning and implementation?
Oui, alors, le Luxembourg est doté d'une administration qui est responsable du développement des systèmes. Qui est le centre de technologie et d'information de l'État. C'est donc l'entité qu'il fallait contacter en amont pour parler de l'idée du projet. Grâce à l'approche belge, nous avions déjà une idée toute construite de ce que nous voulions développer. Nous avons eu la chance d'avoir eu affaire à des collègues à esprit ouvert, qui ont vite accepté d'élaborer une ébauche très complète et adaptée. Le projet fut rapidement validé par les deux administrations. Il ne reste plus qu'à attendre les maquettes et espérer initier les nouvelles étapes. Nous contacterons ensuite, lorsque le projet sera sur pied, nous contacterons d'autres administrations, donc les intervenants privés et la Chambre des notaires, pour leur présenter le nouveau système et les outils pourront être mis à leur disposition. Ils pourront alors avoir beaucoup plus d'avantages à utiliser ces plateformes, surtout en gain de temps. Je pense qu'ils l'accueilleront positivement.
Okay, thank you, merci. I suppose then you've touched on perhaps another aspect that we were hoping to discuss a little bit in terms of sharing not only among agencies within the ministry or within your own country, of course, but also getting in touch with competent authorities of other contracting parties. And you mentioned the Belgian example there, but I'm also wondering perhaps if I could maybe ask the colleagues from Israel in terms of what was the value of your, well, firstly, have you been in touch? I think Tal mentioned a little bit that you'd been in touch not only with us at the HCCH, but also other contracting parties. And perhaps what was the value of the different experiences that you gained when speaking to these other contracting parties?
Yes, thank you, Brody. Yes, indeed, we did touch upon it in Tal's presentation, but maybe just to elaborate a little more. And from the very first stages of our initial even consideration of the eAPP, it was very important for us to learn from the experience of other contracting parties in developing their eAPP. And several years even before the operative stage of our project, we already reached out to a few contracting parties in order to discuss their eAPP methodologies and to understand the basics of developing an eAPP program. And this also included a study visit by one of our technical experts. And as we progressed in the process and initiated the technological work, we approached the PB and we asked you to share with us a list of suggested focal points that we can get in touch with. And Tal already thanked you. It's another opportunity to thank you for all your help in this. We did get a list of really very, very helpful contact points. And over a few weeks, we managed to engage with various colleagues from additional contracting parties. And we'd really like to thank them as well. Everybody we talked to was highly cooperative and willing to share with us their experience and respond to our many questions on both the legal and technical aspects of the development of the eAPP. And I must say that it was very interesting and actually invaluable to learn of the different experiences and technological tools and to consider examples from various jurisdictions. For us, it was naturally crucial that our electronic apostille that we develop will be accepted as valid in every other contracting party, as well as to develop an optimal customer experience. So we were able to learn from those with years of experience with developing the eAPP about their best practices, but also about their challenges and the ways that they dealt with them. Another point is it was an opportunity to let our technical experts meet with their counterpart technical experts. And while examples of electronic apostilles and registers can be found online, it's nothing like talking directly to the developers and learning from their experience. So maybe the bottom line is, I think, understood. We really recommend for every contracting party that is at the early stages of developing an eAPP to reach out to others and benefit from their knowledge and experience. And on our part, we're of course more than happy to share our experience with anybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yael. That's very, very important, very important words of encouragement, I think, for other contracting parties. It's certainly something that we recommend, but it's nice to hear that that you've had a very positive experience speaking to other contracting parties. And particularly if I can maybe add that I agree with respect to the technical experts and their technical counterparts, because that's something obviously that we at the Permanent Bureau do not necessarily have the insight into there. So thank you. I can see that we've got quite a few questions that are building up here in the Q&A. So I might jump to some of those. I think actually an interesting question that you touched on there, Yael, as well, was the importance of having the eApostilles being accepted and kind of able to be accepted by other contracting parties. Obviously, it's a fundamental principle that the apostille, no matter how it is issued or in what format, it should be accepted. But I guess we've had a question here in the Q&A about to what extent it was a challenge before implementing the eAPP for accepting and being able to accept these incoming electronic apostilles. So I'm not sure if that's something that, well, any of the panelists particularly would like to mention. I'm not sure, perhaps Turkey, have you had particular issues in terms of accepting electronic apostilles from other countries prior to eAPP implementation? Or
yes.
Yes.
Yes, before starting the service, the Austrian apostille application was examined on site in September 2018, and its experiences were used. The way of application seemed close to us and helped us to set up our own system. In addition, meetings were held with the Colombian embassy in Ankara and received information about their systems. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps Luxembourg, Cristina, is this something that you've had difficulty with in terms of accepting electronic apostilles prior to implementing on your own side?
Alors, si je comprends bien, accepter les difficultés d'accepter nos apostilles à l'extérieur ou d'accepter au niveau national les e-apostilles de l'extérieur?
Je pense que la question était plutôt pour les apostilles de l'extérieur, en acceptation au Luxembourg, mais justement, en fait, comme l'Israël, Yael avait mentionné, c'est peut-être important aussi de considérer l'acceptation de vos apostilles à l'extérieur aussi. Donc, je ne sais pas comment vous avez résolu ces questions, en fait.
Alors, pour l'instant, étant donné que pour ce qui est de l'apostille électronique, justement, nous prévoyons, comme je l'ai expliqué, le code QR. Donc, nous espérons qu'avec ce code QR, donc, les administrations de pays tiers, elles sauront vérifier, effectuer les vérifications nécessaires qui sont liées au document. Donc, il y a un traçage qui est visible. Et donc, pour nous, nous comptons sur l'installation de l'application, en fait, qui doit arriver en amont. Mais bon, c'est justement des choses qui restent encore à clarifier. Et bon, il y aura un contact à l'extérieur, éventuellement à travers justement le bureau permanent pour nous permettre de faire reconnaître notre apostille électronique.
OK, merci. I see, Yael, you've got your hand up as well. Is that the same comment there?
Yeah, I just wanted to relate to your question. We ourselves were not aware of any problems of accepting eAPPs, but during the talks that we had with other contracting parties, we were more aware of the fact that they specifically were encountering such problems. And this made us send recently a letter by our office to all the government offices and legal advisors, reiterating the importance of accepting eAPPs. And we were not aware of any problem, but hopefully this will ensure that there will also not be one in the future.
Yes, I think we can we hope that too, I suppose, in terms of the acceptance of your eApostilles as well. Okay, we've got a couple of perhaps more technical questions actually relating to Tal, your presentation in particular of the Israeli plans and the system. The first, I might start with one that so the question is related to the fact that the eApostille, if we understand correctly, will be fully fully automated in that context? Will there be human intervention in terms of reviewing, or is that not necessary because of the kind of the digital credentials that the underlying public document from the e-notary system or something like that?
Okay, so I try to explain. So there are several steps and several points of reliability that we are taking as a measure to protect. The first one is for the relevant department that is responsible for issuing the apostille. And second, there are several manners within the transportation layer and the connectivity layers and other layers of security that I cannot get into too many details now in terms for security aspect, but that we are taking in order to assure that we receive the document from the person who sent us. On the other aspect from the Ministry of Justice, once we get and approve the document, there is a significant process that signing the document and registered all the relevant data to be later on be verified by the ERegister. So the entire process is fully reliable, fully secured, and we do not expect the majority of the steps to be needed additional intervention by men in the loop. If needed upon the process about the public document on the notary, so this is different steps. But once the relevant department approve the document, the entire process is fully secured and fully reliable.
Okay, and perhaps a clarification which also came in another question. I'm not sure if you're able to answer, but if for those instances where there is not human intervention in terms of verifying, the question was, do you store the public keys of the digital signature of the document issuing authorities?
I'm not sure I understand fully the question. The question is, do I keep the public key for the ones that are signing the document?
Yes. Yeah, that's the question.
I apologize. I will not be able to get into
That's okay. I thought that might have been the case, but thought it worth a try. But thank you.
Please be sure that we are fully on it in terms for various of means for securing the process and taking the necessary measures in various of scope of the security that is needed.
No problem. And perhaps one other quick follow-up, there was another question about if from the presentation, the payment was actually done before the check of the underlying public document by the competent authority. Is that correct? And if so, what happens if the apostille can't be issued? And then is there, I guess, a mechanism to, yeah.
So there is a form, there is some already an online form for requesting the money back if the process failed. Obviously, this is not fully automatic yet. There is some kind of validation and control measure that has to be taken together with the necessary support to address it. But in Israeli, we have a various of process that are using the same mechanism. So there is a process for failover, and if necessary, to bring back the money for the citizen.
Okay, no, thank you. Okay, I've got another question actually for Turkey that came in terms of what kind of measures are taken in the Turkish implementation in relation to data protection. I think the question was directed at Turkey, but I'm sure that others may have comments on this particular aspect. So yeah, Süheyla, if you could maybe speak about what kind of measures, that data protection measures you've taken at your end?
Information storage department in authorized institutions.
Yeah, just transfer.
Just. And the other şeyde yetkili kurumlara ne diyorduk? and Ministry of Justice and Ministry of the Interior and on the systems. We are just transfer the applications.
Not storage.
Not storage in our systems.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess another question here that we've received from in the Q&A. Typically, I suppose, what kind of digital signatures are being used in terms of by either notaries or for the signing of underlying public documents? Are they, I think the comment here has been made in terms of, are they ordinary, advanced, or qualified signatures? I'm not sure if those categories are something that is understood by our panelists, but perhaps in general, is it something that it's a digital signature that's developed internally by the ministry, or is it something that it's a commercial provider? For perhaps all of our speakers, is something, any comments on the type of digital signature that's going to be used or is used?
Okay, maybe I'll answer that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aviva.
Okay. The Israeli signatures, the ones on paper were, of course, on paper. They were handed into our office. But the electronic signatures are being developed by a private company, which is authorized by the Ministry of Justice, and they are going to keep all the signatures locked by them. And that's how the notaries are going to use their signatures in order to have the eAPP. The rest of the signatures for the official documents are going to be each in their in the government department that is relevant to the paper that the client wants to issue, and they're going to keep the signatures by them, by the departments, and we'll be able to check the signature and to make sure it's the correct signature, and then to have the eAPP in the Ministry of Justice. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, thank you. I see another question here actually for Luxembourg in particular, was what types of agreements has the ministry, if any, had to conclude between different agencies of government in order to ensure, for example, identification of the user, or when submitting a request, or to verify different documents from different agencies? Is there anything like that in terms of interagency cooperation?
Alors, pour l'instant, il n'y a pas de collaboration de ce type. Donc, pour nous, une administration ou un ministère qui émet un document public, et pour nous, ce sera toujours une source sûre. Hein. Il n'y a pas d'accord ou quoi que ce soit à ce niveau-là. Si le document émane d'un notaire, c'est pour nous une source sûre. Nous ne prévoyons pas, nous excluons tout autre type d'acteurs à ce niveau-là, pour l'instant en tout cas.
D'accord, merci. I think we've got another question in terms of if whether there will be changes in terms of pricing. Actually, it's just a question in between the differences between paper apostilles and e-apostilles, if there will be a pricing difference for our different competent authorities. So perhaps any of the speakers that have or would like to comment there, if there's been a change in procedure or price for the user of paper apostille or electronic apostille. Yes, Israel, Aviva.
Yes. Yeah, I can answer that from From our side, there is not going to be a change in pricing, not for the notarial documents and not for the official government documents. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. And we've got another one specifically for Israel, actually. Just to clarify, if the Israeli e-register is already up and running, or was that also tied to the eAPP, the beginning of the eAPP issuance in November, or planned for early November? Is that correct?
Okay, so some of the products are already in production, but it's not yet open for public usage. So once we will establish and promote the apostille, it will be open for usage. So we are working on an agility manner in which we deliver and promote for release as soon as that we can. But stone for open for public usage, it's still not public. It's still not open. It will be open once we complete the entire workflow.
Okay, and perhaps a follow-up question for you first, Tal. The same question actually was in relation to whether the e-apostilles will be issued for electronic documents only, or will it be also for paper documents, in terms of how to get around the issuance of a public document that's in paper form?
Okay, so there is a variety of ways that we need to address this, both by the notary and both by the department. Currently, we are addressing the electronic manners. Later on, we currently evaluate the paper ones, in which will be contains as an electronic document. So we may go to a scanned document later on. This is something that we need to evaluate. It depends on various process, but this is something that we need to get more in depth about the validation process. We bring a lot of attention for the reliability of the process. So we start with the electronic process, and about the scanned document, this is something that we are currently need to validate. And once it's completed, we can move forward.
Okay, great, thank you. And perhaps if I could ask the same question of our other panelists as well, perhaps Cristina first, to what extent, or how are you managing the process in terms of where there are paper public documents that are issued and then to issue them in electronic form? Is that why it was only linked to the electronic notarization? Was that the case, if I understood correctly, or will you have a workaround for a document issued in paper form?
Oui, justement. Ce qu'il y a, c'est que nous envisageons le même processus que l'apostille électronique. Donc, les documents papier seront groupés et donc, il y aura une feuille A4, justement, avec un code QR aussi, qui facilitera la vérification. Donc, ce sera imprimé. Donc, pour l'instant, c'est sous forme d'un autocollant que nous, en principe, qui est collé sur la dernière feuille. Et le processus futur prévoit justement que ce soit une simple impression et le mécanisme de vérification est justement le code QR. Donc, on verra sur le code QR si le document a été modifié ou pas. Voilà.
D'accord, non, merci pour ces commentaires. Süheyla, could I ask you in Turkey then also what's your experience with needing to issue an e-apostille for a paper document, and how do you manage that process?
We only provide services for documents in electronic format. Thank you.
And can I ask you a follow-up question then? What you do, what are all documents issued by, sorry, all public documents are issued in electronic form then? Or are you only doing e-apostilles for electronic documents? Is that?
Only electronic format.
Yes, okay. And so then the paper apostilles will remain for paper public documents?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to catch up a little bit also on the Q&A as we go. We've got time for a few more questions, so I'll keep going. We've got a question here in relation, well, actually, again, to all the panelists. In terms of these developments, obviously, they're very promising for the electronic apostille and implementation of electronic apostille. But to what extent are similar developments taking place to enable digitization of processes relating to legalizations that are outside the scope of the convention? I think we've heard a little bit about some of the electronic or digitization of notarial processes, but perhaps if each of the speakers could make a few comments about how they're also developing processes that are outside of the convention, if I may, even though it's a little bit off topic for today. I'm not sure if Israel has any comments on that first.
Very happy to take it. Can you please go back again for the questions, please?
Yes, sorry, I'm kind of reading and processing at the same time. It's not doing super well for me. No, just basically to what extent you're also digitizing processes outside of the Apostille Convention in terms of legalizations as well.
Okay, so there are various, because the Israeli government is very, very focused about digitalization entirely. So there is a lot of services that are currently being addressed and moved for digitalization. One example that I demonstrated in my presentation is the notary form, in which we could have addressed it based on the document or different aspect, and to just to attach it, because we did identify the notary. We know that it's reliable in signing, so we have the various manners to approve it in terms for the reliability of the document, but we would like to take it for the next steps, both for the reliability and both for the standardization and digitalization. So yes, we promote more and more digital services that can be used and promote and actually improve the work of our workers, about the notaries, or for the citizen that can later be used in those kind of processes. So these services will be applicable both from the central private area within the Israeli government, which is more and more getting the services from a centralized place. And related specifically for the notary, just demonstrate it as more digitalized process. So yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Perhaps Cristina and Luxembourg, I think you touched on a little bit again with the notarization aspect, but is there also digitization of legalization procedures outside the convention? Is that something that Luxembourg is considering or working on at the moment?
Alors, l'idée est vraiment de coupler les deux. Alors, la méthode légalisation respectera toujours la contre-légalisation, bien entendu, mais l'idée, c'est vraiment de déployer la même chose pour les légalisations que pour l'apostille. Donc, on ne fera pas trop de différence. C'est déjà le cas actuellement, hein, il faut quand même l'admettre, mais on se base beaucoup sur le texte de l'apostille pour nos légalisations également. Voilà.
Okay, merci. And Süheyla, in Turkey, are there similar developments in terms of the digitization of the legalization procedures?
Notary service works differently from us. We only mediate on apostate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess I should add here that I know the question was raised in that context, but I also know that the digitization of a legalization process is a little bit difficult because it only is kind of at the national level to a certain point, and then you rely on whatever the state of destination is, of course, as well. So I understand that that part sometimes makes the process a little bit more complicated. And I guess, again, that's why the convention is serving its purpose quite well, and the eAPP continuing to serve that purpose of facilitating the presentation of documents abroad as well.
Maybe I will just,
yes,
sorry for
please.
Maybe to demonstrate a bit more about the effort that we are currently doing about the digitalization. We are working closely with also with the Minister of Foreign Affairs to also take the opportunity to use about documents that are outside of the Apostille Convention to digitalize and to make it an effort. We identified that the process is very, very similar. So once we identified it, we can save and actually centralize the environment and to do it in various of process, but it still can maintain the same process, the same workflow, together with additional reliability means that should be taken. But in Israel, we always think, regardless whether it's from the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are looking at a bit brighter and to see how can we centralize and confine the process. So this is an additional example in which we try to elaborate the system that we do and to simplify other processes that are currently manual.
Okay, great, thank you. I suppose then, looking at a couple of the other questions too, we still have a time for a little bit more. I think perhaps one thing I'd be interested to hear actually from all the speakers also is the, and again, I think Yael touched on it a little bit earlier, but the advice that you would give to other contracting parties that are looking to implement the eAPP. And I think we have some time, so I'd be happy to hear from all of the speakers, in fact, if there are specific aspects of the advice that you'd like to give. But perhaps, Israel, if I could throw it to you first. In addition to the comments you've already made, Yael, is there any additional advice you would give?
Sure. So yes, we thought about it during the whole progress and the work that was done. And I think it comes down to maybe to 6 main points of advice that we could give to other contracting parties looking to implement the eAPP. So the first point would be start early. Shifting from a paper process to the eAPP requires actually a change in mindset. And one important initial step is to prepare the ground for this change. This can be done by engaging continuously with various actors and the relevant government authorities, just to get them on board. And this takes time, so just start as soon as possible. Second point would be to verify that the relevant legal framework permits the issuance of electronic public documents and electronic apostilles. And if it does not, the efforts should be made to amend it as soon as possible. And another very important point would be, of course, to obtain the necessary political will and budget to engage with the process. For us, this was done by government decision, like we presented, but I guess that each contracting party would have its own domestic way of doing it. Developing an eAPP can be a very complicated process. And so our fourth point of advice would be to consider setting up a task force like the one that Aviva talked about for the development and implementation of the eAPP, and also appointing coordinators with responsibilities for both legal and technical aspects. So the task force can, for example, gather information from relevant government departments on the nature of their public documents. And this information can, along the way, and subsequently be used for the development of the technological platform to provide a seamless customer service experience. Another point that we already talked about is to engage with contracting parties that have already implemented the eAPP. This is very important in our view, and it's key. It's a key in preliminary stages of the work. And maybe the last point is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and don't hesitate just to go step by step, because the transformation from paper system to the eAPP does not take place overnight. And it might be useful to engage in a gradual process and to begin with issuing electronic apostates to certain public documents at first, and later to move on to others, and then to delay all the process until everything is ready. And this could be relevant even if there are only a few electronic public documents for which electronic apostate can be relevant. And the main point there that if this is successful, and we believe that it must be successful, then this will signal to other departments that they can gain a lot from transitioning to electronic documents and to the electronic apostate. And it will provide the decision makers with the evidence needed to allow them to prioritize efforts and budgets to promote the project. So in short, we think that initial success will help drive the adoption of the eAPP across the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yael. I think you've touched on quite a few important comments. I was madly taking notes there as well for our own advice for the future. But I think your last point in particular is quite interesting. It's not all or nothing. And that actually ties in a little bit to the theme that we're kind of looking at in the next discussion. We'll hear from a number of different contracting parties that are at different stages and have implemented different components at different times. So not necessarily going all the way at once. So we'll hopefully hear a little bit more about that later. Perhaps I could ask Luxembourg, Cristina, do you have any particular advice that, given your experience so far, that you would like to share with other contracting parties?
Alors, je pense que la collègue d'Israël a été vraiment très exhaustive et pour nous également, ces conseils sont très importants et sont très pertinents. La seule chose que je pourrais éventuellement ajouter, c'est éventuellement de voir au niveau interne, déjà au niveau national, de commencer par vérifier les moyens de digitalisation existants, les logiciels et d'autres produits au niveau national avant d'imaginer la conception du projet ou d'avancer avec le projet. Je pense que c'est une façon de gagner du temps et sur base des modèles et de moyens déjà existants. Voilà.
Okay, merci. Turkey, Süheyla, do you have anything to add there in terms of advice that you would give other contracting parties considering implementing the eAPP?
In the digitalizing world, we are in favor of starting work without staying away from developing technologies. We started our work by taking responsibility for this work without any obligation. Other contracting parties should try to keep up with new technologies with the same thought. It is known that the number of official documents created in electronic format is increasing. Considering this situation, e-government initiatives and developments should be kept up with in order to further improve the apostate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see, Aviva, you have an additional comment to add there?
No, I think maybe
No?
it's a mistake.
Just a rogue hand. That's okay. No, thank you. Well, that's fine. I think perhaps another question, and perhaps one of our last ones before we wrap up, was in relation to the political will comment that Yael made in particular. In the experience of the three countries that we have here, how did the decision to implement the eAPP come about? Was that something that was kind of a government-driven initiative? I think we've heard a little bit about the push for digitization in particular that Tal has mentioned, but I guess we're also interested to know whether, for example, as a result of the pandemic, there has been a push from the citizen side, from the user side, in terms of putting pressure on governments to digitize services. So yeah, be interested to know in the motivations behind the decision to implement the eAPP. Perhaps if I could put Israel on the spot first, is that fair?
Yes, Brody. So I think we did discuss the fact that we did start with initial stages of the EAPP a few years ago. But naturally, the pandemic had a big effect on our initial program, and it actually emphasized the need to provide customers of public authorities with digital access to services. During lockdown, our offices were closed, and it was very hard to get the apostille, and suddenly the need and all the work that we have already started to do, I think found ears in other offices and in higher levels. So this enabled us to be a part of this government resolution that we talked about, that was wider, talked about digitization of services generally, but we put inside the apostille, and we put inside also the legalization, which is outside the apostille. They're both in there. The budget is in there, and they also bring together all the government, different government ministries is in there. So this was a very big thing that the pandemic helped us to push along. And in addition, as we said, we had also to amend legislation in order to have the flexibility we needed to issue electronic apostilles. And usually such a process would take relatively a long time. It's a process that involves the parliament. But because of the pandemic, the parliament was very forthcoming to help us to push this forward as fast as possible. And these regulations were amended in a relatively short time. Especially, it was a time that it was even hard to come to the parliament, and we were there to present the importance of this amendment. And so this was also very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Yael. Cristina, could I ask you in terms of, just had a mental blank.
Alors, il y a déjà au niveau politique, au niveau national, une forte volonté du gouvernement de digitaliser des services publics à tous les niveaux. Donc déjà là, on a un soutien gouvernemental. Mais l'initiative vient de notre bureau. Surtout, l'initiative vient de nous parce que donc il y a une plus-value pour les intéressés, donc les usagers, mais également une plus-value pour nos agents qui auront leurs tâches facilitées. Donc, au niveau des guichets, il y aura moins de présence. Il y aura déjà il y a la possibilité de travailler à distance. C'est quelque chose qui n'est pas faisable actuellement. Donc, c'est une plus-value dans tous les sens. Donc, il y a très peu d'inconvénients, je trouve. Voilà.
Excellent. Merci. That's exactly what we like to hear. No, thank you. And hopefully that process does become easier as the implementation progresses as well. Süheyla from Turkey, could I ask about the experience there in terms of how the political decision was made, or whether there was a push from users or as a result of the pandemic?
We started to serve before the pandemic. Our only aim was to capture the digital world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That seems like a very logical inspiration of the digitization and digital world. So thank you. Okay. I think that brings us essentially to the end of the session. I do note that we've got a couple of quite encouraging comments that have been put in the chat in terms of, in particular, I think Costa Rica and France that are looking at implementation at the moment. So they have found this session to be quite useful. I hope that the other participants have equally found it to be quite useful. And I guess on behalf of the Permanent Bureau, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers from Israel, from Luxembourg, and from Turkey in this session.